Everybody's looking for the next hot waiver wire prospect, that guy that can send them to the moon, or a guy they can just dash in their lineups for a little bit until the rest of their players get back on track. We also want to turn and burn on the waiver wire, taking our last guy, our last jabroni player, and just turning him over for another hot item off the waiver wire, and just keep doing it until something sticks here. And we have some players from this week that are looking good, that are trending up, even though it's a one-game sample that we need to be interested in. And one player that we need to talk about this week is Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver of the Patriots. He saw a big workload last week, looked pretty promising, and we're going to dig into the stats today to see whether or not you need him for fantasy football going forward. That being said, you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Stop missing out on this information. We're doing these deep dives on these lesser known players off the waiver wire, those bottom of the barrel players that you may not be thinking about, that may pop off later on down the road this season, that you need to have the information on so you don't miss out. You know who they are. Hit that subscribe button. Stop missing out. But let's take a look at Kendrick Bourne here. Decent week last week against the Eagles. Very interesting game script because the Patriots had to throw the ball a lot. He had 11 targets, caught 6 balls for 64 yards. He also had 2 touchdowns, scoring 24.4 fantasy points. That type of production from a guy like Kendrick Bourne, you're not expecting every week. You're not expecting those type of stat lines. But when you see 11 targets, 6 receptions, first week of the season, leading the team in routes ran, getting a lot of opportunity in a plus matchup, you see some trends here that's on a small sample that you may want to look at here, because it looks like when it's a negative game script for the Patriots, they're throwing it a lot. They look like they're going to have to put it in the air, and when they have to put it in the air, it looks like Kendrick Bourne's getting a lot of opportunity. And what's that going to look like going forward? Looking at the stats, though, he was running a lot of routes, and he was running everywhere. Downfield, short field, medium field, everywhere on the field. He was running posts. He was running deep. He was running drags, anything it was, he was running it. A good thing to see. And he was all over in the slot on the outside. He was getting a lot of opportunity. Focal point of the offense, it looked like. And he had a 20.4% target share. That's a good share of the workload coming out of the backfield. They were tossing it to the running backs. So the fact that they were tossing it to other positions other than wide receivers means that a 20% target share is pretty decent. They were also tossing it to tight ends. He had 3 deep targets. That's probably the number that we want to look at the most, because he's getting targeted downfield, getting targeted deep. That means if he brings in any of those balls, big gains equate to fantasy production. You catch a couple of those, next thing you know, you got double-digit fantasy scoring. He had a 93% route participation rate. He was on the field a lot. He was running routes a lot. He ran more routes than any other wide receiver on this team. Had 129 air yards. That's through volume and deep targets. He had 3 deep balls thrown his way of 20 plus yards or more. That's something you want to look at, because not many wide receivers get that. You want those wide receivers who get 3, 4, 5 deep targets a game, because eventually in those plus matchups, you're going to reel in a couple. That we could be seeing that with Kendrick Bourne. Devontae Parker was out. That's a big thing, because he does see a lot of deep targets. He's going to see that in the offense when he's back. They signed him for a 3-year deal this offseason for some reason, and they're going to use him on the deep ball. And they're going to use Kendrick Bourne too, because he's proven. He proved himself in week 1. He's going to continue to see that. We're going to see how this offense flows once Devontae Parker is back. But the fact that Bourne saw 11 targets in week 1 is something you want to pay attention to. But mainly, you want to look at the game script here, as it was tight and it was pass heavy, pass focused for this offense. So if we're looking at game scripts like that, we might be seeing Bourne have some fantasy production going forward. I would not expect 24, 25 fantasy point performances. Maybe more like 10, 11, 12, 13 in these types of game scripts. And maybe in the lower volume game scripts, you may want to bench him or even drop him and flip him or whatever you need to do in your basic 10, 12-man fantasy football league. Looking at the schedule, though, we got the Dolphins this week. Who knows what's going to happen? We know the Patriots want to keep the clock slow. They want to run that clock. They do not want a fast-paced game, especially with the Dolphins. But the Dolphins want to run it hot. They want to pass the ball. They want to sling it downfield to Tyreek Hill. If they connect early, which they do a very good job of that, you may be seeing this team throw the ball all over the yard, trying to keep up, creating opportunities for Kendrick Bourne. He might be a sneaky sleeper this week. He might be a sneaky sleeper again. He's a guy you're not really guessing as a start, really. If you put him in your starting lineup in your basic 12-man league, something happened to your team. Something happened. But I do like him in DFS as a run back option if you're stacking Dolphins in a bigger slate. If you're playing in a huge tournament, I think that'd be a good opportunity there, considering you got a 20% target share. If you're starting him in redraft in a basic 12-man league, something happened and you need to do that, or you're just gambling. And if you're going to gamble, then it's just a gamble, and if he hits, he hits, and he doesn't, and you're just seeing what happens because something happened with your lineup. Somebody got hurt, you're missing somebody, you don't like your team or whatever. Well, he is a guy getting targets, getting opportunity. Then we got the Jets. I wouldn't really even think about him in that matchup. And then the Cowboys, it's going to be an interesting one as well. Could be a slower-paced game. I see the Cowboys getting ahead, though. They may need to throw it a bit. And then we got to see when Devonta Parker is back, though. Kendrick Bourne, though, is seeing some opportunities. You need him, though, because you're hurting at wide receiver, and you need to pick up. You need a guy who's getting targets, and you need to look at recency biases right now and see what's going on. And he's one of the few wide receivers on the waiver wire right now getting targets, getting a large target share, and seeing some upside. And he has a good game script coming up. And you want to gamble on the upside because the upside's real. In these game scripts that could go off against the Dolphins, that one could be another one where he sees some upside. However, he hit on his upside last week, 2 weeks in a row. Might be a trend that's hard to hit, but you just have to see. I wouldn't bet on it. I wouldn't want to, but some people have to. You don't need him because you think he's a one-game wonder, and that could be the case. That very well could be the case. This is a slow volume passing offense, a slow offense in general. You got Mac Jones there. There are going to be some games like we saw last Sunday where they have to air it out. We might see it this week. But again, they want to keep it slow. They want to use the running backs. They want to run the clock. They do not want game scripts like they saw on Sunday. They do not want that to happen. They don't want Kendrick Bourne doing that. They don't want to toss him the ball 11 times. That's the thing about that. That's the thing that's scary about Kendrick Bourne. But he is a free piece off the waiver wire. He does have some production to his name. He does have some upside in certain game scripts. He does have some things you can focus on if your fantasy team's hurting and you need a pickup. If you're in a deeper league, if you're in a 16, 20-man league, 22, 24, whatever, deep dynasties on waiver wire, whatever, you need a pickup. That's a guy that can be an option, but you know the downside. We know the offense. We know what's all baked into this profile, but he is seeing some targets in the small sample of one game. So you really have to tread those waters lightly. My thoughts on him is he's a gamble. He's up and down, but he is seeing targets. And if you're hurting, then you're hurting and you may want to go with it. But more than likely, you're not going to have the roster space or the lineup construction to be able to start him. You might be able to hide him on your roster a bit, see what happens with him long term, see if he gets another good week. But unless you're hurting, I don't see him fitting on much lineups this week. I don't see him fitting. I don't see him being a starting option for many people. But it might be a case on somebody here and there just because they're facing some injuries. Some guys are face planting and they want to take the risk, take the gamble. I like him more for DFS, honestly. I think if you can get in a big tournament there, stack some Dolphins, run it back with Kendrick Bourne, you might have something. That might be an interesting option there for DFS. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I want to hear about it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on the way out, and I'll catch you on the next video.